Thank you, Alvin. Well, hey, I was trying to figure out where the heck I was. I leaned over to Assemblyman Hernandez. I said, we're definitely not in Sacramento hearing a speech like that. All this good news, all this example. I'm grateful for Albert making sure that he puts this mic on before I start speaking. I'm not going to say anything that important, and you'll never get a soundbite anyway. But I want to just say, you know, a couple things. I don't want to connect the dots, but hardly do I want to repeat what your president just said. But first and foremost, congratulations. Thank you for your example. Thank you for your devotion to this extraordinary cause and vision that goes back in a time when California was in the future business. And I've been traveling all up and down the state as chair of the Economic Development Commission. I was just down near Imperial County. And as you know, Imperial County's got 28.5% unemployment. I left small little county this morning where I live in Marin County at 5.8% unemployment. Just put that in perspective, 5.8% to 28.5%. We are living in two different worlds in the same state. Increasingly, as you all know, a coastal state and an inland state, no longer necessarily divided north and south as it has traditionally been, but increasingly west to east or east to west. The politics of this state accordingly have changed. But in the 60s, in 1962, when you got in the business of recycling and really driving the replenishment strategy, we were in the future business. This was at a time when our state was the tentpole for the American economy. There was no other state in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that grew jobs at the rate of the state of California. In fact, we grew between 1950 and 1980 at an annual rate of about 3.7% in annual job growth. What's happened since is what alarms me the most, and what enlivens me the most in the context of what I just heard from your president. Between 1980 and 2010, going from being the tentpole of the American economy and job creation, the last 3 decades we've flatlined. 3.7% to the last 3 decades and 1.1%. The nation has actually outperformed California in job creation. We've become, dare I say it, average. Now, I don't know about you. Most of you have grown up here, lived here, love this place. We're not used to defending ourselves as being average in California. This has always been a state of dreamers, of doers, of entrepreneurs, of innovators that long prides itself on being on the leading and cutting edge, as the WRD is, of new ideas and innovation. And so I've been trying to reconcile this. I've been traveling all up and down the state, talking about jobs and the economy, and I've been casing other people's joints. I come from the private sector. I have about 1,000 employees in my 15 businesses. And one thing I know, if I'm not casing my competitors' joints, they're casing mine. And we certainly know that's the case in California, where all these governors are out here on hunting trips, hunting for jobs. But the principle is simply this, that the answers to all our challenges are out there. We just have to have the courage to go find them. But through the process of the last year, as I've literally physically and virtually traveled the country and just got back from South Korea, one of those finalists that was just named, and was spending a lot of time on the Singapore plug-and-play models and other things, try to reconcile our economic jobs issues. One thing I realized, if you don't like the way the world looks standing up, stand on your head. Go local. Because when you go local, you see extraordinary things happening. You know, the old paradigm was we have to wait in a hierarchical structure for the guy or gal on the white horse to come save the day. But the world has changed dramatically, no longer connected, but hyper-connected. The tools of technology changing the paradigm dramatically. It's no longer top-down, it's side-by-side. Big is getting small, and small, WRD, is getting big. It's now about the armies of David's, not Goliath. So the whole thing is being flipped upside down. That's the spirit that brought me down here. The spirit of the past was mega projects. 1937, the Central Valley Water Project. 1960, and the incredible vision of then Pat Brown on the State Water Project. Mega projects. And we've been still stuck in that mindset. And as a consequence, in the last 50 years, we stopped investing in our lead as it relates to water infrastructure. Not meeting the needs of even population of 10 or 15 years ago, let alone today's needs and the future needs in a state that's going to grow by 23 million people in the next 4 decades. So the principle I'm espousing is this. I'm as frustrated as you are with Sacramento, not because of the lack of leadership. You've got 2 leaders, some of them Mendoza and Hernandez here, that you've recognized as leaders that are doing extraordinary work for you. But because of the system, because we're stuck in an old mindset where we're still fighting yesterday's battles. Meanwhile, we go local, and you guys are stepping up and stepping in and solving problems. We've been talking about a comprehensive solution for water for my entire life. We got close a few years ago, $11.1 billion bond, but we had environmentalists on one side and environmentalists on the other side. We had farmers on one side and farmers on the other side. It's just not as easy as farmers versus environmentalists anymore, or urban versus rural. It's more complex. And the irony of all this, connecting a dot, is it brings us back to the old paradigm. The water issue is still north and south, while the rest of our issues, increasingly again, are west and east. And so when Albert makes the point, we're going to get off importation, in this case not of oil, but water, which is perhaps as vexing, and not deal with the old paradigm of north versus south, I get excited about that. It enlivens my senses. It distills in me a sense of hopefulness and possibility, of well-being. The notion of local empowerment, regionalism, regions rising together, the distribution of remarkable ideas within 43 cities within this district, the remarkable capacity of people, regardless of their political parties, working together to bridge regional rivalries. You're that model in this state, on the leading and cutting edge of technology, the leading and cutting edge of ideas. You're not dreamers, you're doers. You're an example. So I am here to end as I begin. Thank you for that example. At a time where I'm not so interested, and I imagine you're not as well, on who's to blame, but rather what to do, you're doing it. And the challenge for all of us is to scale your work and equally distribute it across the rest of the state. So it's not just isolated here in a third of LA County, but can be expanded throughout our great state. We cannot legislate rainfall. This is the most vexing issue of our time. I'm a believer, a complete convert, an advocate as it relates to climate change. I'm a believer in the principles of AB 32, our low carbon green growth strategies. I'm a believer in leading by example, in this case, not just LEAD, but LEAED, with the LEED Gold certification that this building has provided you. We have got to step up to the plate. We've got to lean in to the world we're living in. We got to once again recapture that position of leadership, not just throughout this region, this state, and our country, but around the rest of the world. And so without overstating it, I just want to compliment you for not understating the significance of your resolve and your example. Final point. You know, I think this is interesting, and I think it's important for those of you, because everything he said, PLAs and local hire, boy, I felt like I was mayor of San Francisco again. It all felt good to hear that. I was trying to run that Hetchechi system up there in San Francisco through our Public Utilities Commission. We run the regional water for only 2.5 million folks, 20 cities and 4 counties. So we're kind of a small suburb versus the work you're doing here. But I appreciate the principles and the challenges of dealing with above ground storage, below ground storage, issues of conveyance, the challenges of desalination, and the issues of water recycling and water replenishment, all those challenges. But there's also the challenge of implementation of AB 32. You are part of that. We're moving forward to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 20% below 1990 levels to 1990 levels by 2020. Here's an interesting fact. This gets no attention. Look it up. It's fascinating to me, and it's important because success leaves clues. You can convince ideologues that they're wrong when you prove through the work you do that things can be done in a way that can grow an economy and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our consumption, as you've proven. But you recall the United States pulled away from Kyoto. It wasn't Republicans, it was Democrats and Republicans that pulled away from Kyoto. Bill Clinton loves to tell this story. He said the only legislation was ever rejected before it was ever introduced was the final print of the negotiated agreement between Al Gore and the Kyoto protocols that he was bringing back from Japan. It was rejected 95-0 in the US Senate before it was even introduced, before Al Gore returned from those final negotiations. Because not that long ago, people did not believe you could reduce your greenhouse gas emissions and grow your economy. Here's an interesting fact. It's 2012. This year, the Kyoto Accords were to roll back our greenhouse gas emissions by 2012. There were 170 to 44 wealthy nations. We know for a fact, because they're going to unveil the envelopes this year, we know for a fact, we'll see the others, but we know for a fact 4 countries will succeed in reaching those Kyoto Accords. What are they? Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. Now here's an interesting fact. Before Lehman Day, September 15, 2008, before the macroeconomic wheels fell off, those 3 or 4 countries had higher growth rates than the United States of America, had lower income inequality than the United States of America, and had lower unemployment than the United States of America, because they dramatically changed the way they produced and consumed energy. So what is it about folks that are not convinced that moving in the direction and the example that you prove by proving your critics wrong and raising the bar as you did in 2006 with the wind strategy, that hasn't been proven elsewhere? We have got to be open to argument, is my point. We've got to be interested in evidence. The opportunity for California is to lead by example through the implementation of AB 32 and once again capture the imagination of this country and the world through a low-carbon green growth strategy, of which you are a principal player as it relates to the issue of water conservation and as it relates to the issue of procurement. So I'm just here to share that because I'm passionate about that issue, and you are a big part of our fate as it relates to that and our future. Thank you again to the directors for your outstanding work. Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here. All the city council members, thank you for being here. Your 2 outstanding assembly leaders. Thank you for restoring a sense of optimism in a time in our state where there's a lot to be pessimistic about. And here's my final words. Here's the next 50 years, because I'm convinced, based on the last 50 years, that the best is yet to come. Congratulations, everybody.